toad. So there's that.
There is that. And I'll just say that this is somebody who believes that Biden, as he puts it, is spiritually wicked. But I think we didn't even, because it was so, the absurdity of what he said was so overwhelming. We didn't even mention the fact that his point in that video was that he was arguing that people should pray for Trump to get back in power instead of rioting on January 6th. He compared Trump no longer being the president to slavery. To slavery.
But again, it was slavery for him wasn't that bad. It was benevolent. It was a benevolent system that took drooling, stupid Africans and showed them civility, basically. And next thing you know, now we have some opportunity in the land. That's how he sees it, and that again, that's about the extent of his knowledge. But you can't have it both ways. Slavery can't be what you're referring to Trump not being reelected, but also it really wasn't that bad, so you got to choose one.
There's also this really bizarre twist in the story that the pastor's son-in-law is Josh Duggar, the disgraced oldest brother from the show 19 Kids and Counting, who's, by the way, currently in prison serving a sentence for possession of child pornography.
Oh, well, no one's perfect. Sin exists in the world, and Jesus, all you got to do is call on Jesus and he'll come in there and he'll wash your sins white as snow. You know what I'm saying? That's all you got to do. You just always have to believe in Jesus. That's it. But, Donald Trump, him being out of office, that's the devil, of course. So is Barack Obama.
Yeah. Who was it that said that that Barack Obama, Thomas Sowell said that Barack Obama was as bad as Adolf Hitler. And that what you just said reminded me of that, because you brought up just Pearly Things getting really embarrassed on the H3 podcast as they tried to hold her accountable.
That was so bad.
So horrible. Because she's making the argument that because Roots was a movie, that it was overplaying the awfulness of slavery. And she just couldn't actually defend that point. But you have to defend that point, right? If you're a conservative, you made the point, you can't apologize, you can never say you're wrong. So you have to sit there and say, yeah, actually, I think that slavery wasn't that bad. And especially as a white conservative saying that, you'll never be able to say that in a way that doesn't make you look like the worst person to ever exist.
And they don't understand it, and they don't want to understand it. And again, it's really bigger than just like what happened in America with the slavery system. It's really just being willing to understand how society works and how human beings function and what we do to each other, depending on the circumstances, depending on what the environment's like. It's really just more about that. So oftentimes when people go above and beyond to do things like protect the American system of slavery, you're really just showing that you don't understand the world and you don't understand how society works. That's all you're showing.
I mean, and it's the same people right now who are making the argument that affirmative action is actually racist and that it's anti-racist to reverse a policy that was only put in place to attempt to, reverse the horrible impacts of segregation and slavery in this country. So now to claim that actually white people are the victims of racism, actually slavery wasn't that bad. Actually, white people were the people who, educated the slaves and uplifted them out of slavery. I mean, it really is somehow creating a narrative where they're always the victim and they're always the savior. In these conservatives' minds, they have to be both. White people have to be both sides of the coin, and they're in ridiculous narrative of American history.
I was gonna say how the West was won, that type of attitude. You know what I'm saying? Like how we won the West. It was won fair and square. We just, you know what I'm saying? It was a game, and we just won the game. But I think that's a book or a song, How the West Was Won. But it sums up the attitude. This country was won, but in fact, this country's an empire. Just look at all the land we control. And two, I mean, just it's so crazy. Like you look at some of the things, the horrible things that have happened in this country that weren't that long ago. When you really put it in perspective, my grandfather was born in 1916, and a lot of the massacres and the situation that was going on with a Native American named Sitting Bull happened in like not that long before that. Plains Indians literally just being straight up massacred. The treaty after treaty after treaty being broken. These things happened like in the very late 1800s, the early 1900s. These things weren't long ago. You know what I'm saying? So like the United States, in fact, has a very rich history of becoming an empire, because that's what the United States is. Our landmass is huge, and it used to be many, many, many nations, and now it's not.
Right. And I think just to the point of like how recent this history really is, the argument that the Supreme Court is making, and I'm bringing it back to this other story about affirmative action, is that racism is over, which is an absolutely absurd thing to claim. I mean, first of all, Jim Crow laws, the Civil Rights Act wasn't passed, until the mid 1960s. That's recent. That's exceptionally recent.
My dad was born in 1951. You know what I'm saying? Yeah.
This is exceptionally recent history. So the idea that in just, 1 or 2 generations, we have completely, destroyed concepts of race and inequality in this country, we could look around and say, that's obviously not the case.
Mm-hmm. And again, racism is honestly just a part of human psychology. It just is. So that's why there's always work to be done.
Absolutely. All right. Well, we are out of time. Jackson, thank you so much for joining me today.
Yes.
Remind all the people where they can follow you and see your content.
Yes, follow me at youtube.com/@politicsandpaper. We stream all the time, and I got a weekly show on Wednesday nights, and we're going to get Rayvon on there very soon. So, yeah, check me out, Politics and Paper. Another great show with you.
Thanks. Yep, great show with you as well. And everybody go check out his other content. Thank you for tuning in. Stick around because the main show's next, and we have more watch lists for you tomorrow. So don't forget to tune into that as well.
All right, back on TYT, Jane Huger and a Kasparian, back as an, I guess, from yesterday. Anyways, huge affirmative action ruling by the Supreme Court. We will have, if you're uninitiated, surprising opinions on that. And then later in the program, Biden is in a world of trouble. The economy, we'll have a discussion, maybe even a little bit of a debate on how the economy is doing, but Biden's faculty is not doing well. We will show you, unfortunately, the evidence. So a lot to get to. Without further ado, the giant Supreme Court case.
Well, yes, let's start with that.
The Supreme Court is now striking down both Harvard and UNC's program when it comes to race used in admissions. The court going forward in their decision saying they're going to set new limits on the use of race when it pertains to a particular student must be part of their individual story and not simply their identity.
The Supreme Court has ruled to narrow the scope in which race can be used to determine admissions in the nation's universities and colleges. Now, how was this case brought about? Just to go back, give you the context. Students for Fair Admissions, a conservative group, sued Harvard University and the University of North Carolina over their race-conscious admissions programs, alleging intentional discrimination toward Asian American applicants. So the court held in an opinion for the conservative majority written by Chief Justice John Roberts that Harvard and UNC's admissions programs violate the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. And that was the constitutional argument that the plaintiffs brought forward in this case. And the Supreme Court justices, the majority of them agreed with that. The vote was 6-3 in the UNC case and 6-2 in the Harvard case, with Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson recusing herself in the Harvard case specifically. Now, both programs, according to John Roberts, who's the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, lack sufficiently focused and measurable objectives warranting the use of race, unavoidably employ race in a negative manner, involve racial stereotyping, and lack meaningful endpoints. We have never permitted admissions programs to work in that way, and we will not do so today. Now, race can still be considered, although in a far more limited way in the admissions process, and I'll explain how that works in just a moment. Before I do, Cenk, what do you think about this ruling?
Okay, brace for impact, I agree with it. So I've actually said that I'm against affirmative action probably dozens of times on this show, but nonetheless, people are surprised whenever you go outside of orthodoxy. So I think affirmative action was definitely correct in the beginning. I'll give you a quick example of why. So for example, if you're, just pick a random profession, you're a longshoreman, you got a good job, it pays decent wages back then, right? It started in the 1960s. And you want to pass your job on to your kids. That makes sense. I get it. I get your motivation behind it. But at the time, only white people had those jobs. So they would constantly pass their jobs on to other white people, their kids, which again, as a parent, I get it, but we had to allow minorities to break into that system. And we had to do that at every level for jobs, universities, etc., because folks did not have an opportunity, okay? But after a while, it becomes stigmatizing. So I'll give you another anecdote. When I was in law school, I remember back then I was a Republican, and I remember being with a couple other Republican students, and I said about one of our classmates and someone who I was friends with, but they didn't know that. They said, "Oh yeah, I wonder how he got in here." And I thought, and I said, by being a great student. But for them, every minority, it doesn't matter if they went to Harvard, Princeton, where, Yale, Stanford, nothing mattered. It was disqualified because of their race. Oh, they didn't earn it. And I think that has had a massively corrosive effect in this country against minorities. So I think it has now become counterproductive. I agree with the Supreme Court's decision. I have more on that, but that's my initial
So
thoughts.
I want to talk about how they did limit the scope in which race can be considered, right? So for instance, what the justices argue, or at least Chief Justice John Roberts, is that the struggles or the challenges or whatever the applicant has gone through as a result of their race can be considered. And how would it be considered? Well, there are multiple ways. One of the main ways could be through their essay. Now, those who disagree with the decision here argue, well, then that forces students of color to write their essays about race. Maybe they wanted to write their essays about something else. But nonetheless, I do want to give you some more details on that. Roberts wrote, Chief Justice Roberts wrote, at the same time, as all parties agree, nothing in this opinion should be construed as prohibiting universities from considering an applicant's discussion of how race affected his or her life, be it through discrimination, inspiration, or otherwise. And someone named David Hinojosa, who argued the case before the court, said that while the ruling did, quote, make it heck of a lot harder to use race as a factor in admissions, it would not totally prevent universities from pursuing diversity goals similar to affirmative action. He told the New York Times this, comparing this ruling to the reversal of Roe v. Wade. As you all know from last summer, when this court wants to overrule precedent, it knows how to overrule precedent, and that language is not in Chief Justice Roberts' opinion, he said, referring to the court's sweeping decision overturning Roe v. Wade. The court said that it has permitted race-based admissions only within the confines of narrow restrictions. University programs must comply with strict scrutiny. They may never use race as a stereotype or negative, and at some point they must end.
Yeah, so all right, first of all, I again agree with them. I think it definitely should be considered within the context of the essay. They should not use the essay as a proxy. Wink, wink, tell me about your race and I'll let you in. But as long as they're taking a genuine look at the essay, oftentimes what you have overcome is probably the #1 indicator, in my opinion, of whether you'll be successful at school or anything else. Honestly, when I interview people for employment here at TYT, that's my #1 question. Well, tell me some adversity you had and how you overcame it. Because that tells you the character of a person and how hard they're gonna work and how they're gonna persevere, etc. And that'll get the size of the fight in the person is by far the most important thing. And oftentimes that is told in an essay. And oftentimes it is overcoming some sort of racial boundary or income boundary, which then leads me to saying, I think the much better way to go, and I think they should use this, is class-based affirmative action rather than race-based affirmative action. And I know that a lot of people will say, okay, enough with affirmative action, period, right? And others will say, no, it has to be race-based. But I don't know why, a poor white kid in Appalachia, it doesn't have a bigger disadvantage than, the Obama kids in Martha's Vineyard. Sorry. Okay, so I know that's gonna make a lot of people uncomfortable. Doesn't mean race is not relevant. I understand the context of race, and I understand how it's a disadvantage. Having said that, in these contexts, I think class is a giant disadvantage. I think the poor are overwhelmed by the rich.
Right. And
then that leads me to the last point here in this context, Anna, sorry. Legacy admissions. Legacy admissions are an abomination. And they help the rich more than anyone else. It's when you're an alumni of a school and your kid applies, they have a far, far better chance of getting in. By the way, we have a petition about that, and you can see the link in the description box, tyt.com/petitions, and legacy admissions, because it's way worse than affirmative action.
Yeah, I mean, look, just going back to the point that you made about class, I think class is a better indicator of the struggles that a student had to overcome in order to get to the point that they're at as they're applying for college admissions. So what I think made me support affirmative action, or the part of affirmative action that I thought, let me reword this. The strongest case I heard in support of affirmative action really had to do with, the fact that Black and Latino students are overrepresented when it comes to the lower socioeconomic statuses, right? And with that means you don't have the extra money or the extra resources for, special tutoring outside of school, right? Or for extra lessons on how to take the SAT test and how to excel at the SAT test, right? Those types of classes, that type of instruction is very, very expensive. And we know how education is funded in some districts, right? A lot of it relies on property taxes. Other states have found better ways to kind of fund public schools, so it's far more equal, but that's not the case in every state. And so I liked that argument, but I think it's a mistake to tie that argument simply to race. I think that argument works better when you focus on class. Because as you mentioned, there are plenty of disadvantaged, poor white kids as well who have to go through a lot and have to fight a lot harder in order to get the kind of education and gain the kind of merit necessary to get accepted into these universities.
So some are already criticizing me on social media, et cetera.
Oh wow, that's new.
I know, that's a shocking turn of events, saying that I'm trying to appease. This is the latest thing we're doing where I'm trying to appease the right wing. Hilarious. Okay, so first of all, if that's true, that's interesting because I've had this opinion in my entire life. So was I doing it 20 years ago? I wrote a passage in my book about 4 years ago against affirmative action. It's in the book, you can see it. I didn't invent it yesterday, okay? And so, look, just because you're in one side of the political spectrum doesn't mean that you have to agree with every single position. And this is not because, oh golly gee, it's so unfair to white people. No, that's not the issue at all. It's, hey, how are minorities perceived? What is fair, what is just, what is the most productive way to go forward so that we eliminate racism? But I'll give you more examples. Look, let's take my family. So we're all the same race, obviously, we're the same family, kind of. You'll see my kid is, of course, half Asian. But my dad was an incredibly poor farmer in southeastern Turkey. I grew up middle class thanks to the heroic work of my dad and free college that he got in Turkey. My son is now growing up in an even better situation. We're all the same race. Should we all be treated the same when going into school? No, my son is 1,000 times better off than his grandfather was. 1,000 times. So my dad needed the help. He needed the help the most when he's a farmer and he's broke and he needs that hand up to get him up, okay? I didn't need the break as much. I don't think my kid needs to break it all, okay? So if you say that's outrageous, you have to take race into consideration, I'm sorry, I don't agree. Now, if you say, hey, Jake, you're not the relevant race here, okay, that's a fairer point. But I could make the same exact point about African-American families, Latino families, et cetera, right? And so if and yes, African-Americans, Latinos, unfortunately still in this country, are in a lower socioeconomic class because of the history of discrimination and racism. That is definitely true, okay? But having said that, if you do it based on class, you're gonna help those same people anyway, but you're gonna direct it more to the people who actually need it, as opposed to the son of the CEO of Coke, all right? Or there's some incredibly successful African Americans in this country. Their kids don't need it nearly as much as any kid race that's poor and has to overcome so much more.
And prior to this ruling, I should note that there were 8 states that had outlawed affirmative action in the college admissions process. So California was actually the first, and they did so in the 1990s, followed by Washington, which actually repealed their ban just last year. Then there's Florida, Michigan, Nebraska, Arizona, New Hampshire, Oklahoma, and Idaho. I also wanted to just quickly go over the dissenting opinion. Justice Sonia Sotomayor actually spoke and gave a speech about her dissent, and here's what she said. Today, the court concludes that indifference to race is the only constitutionally permissible means to achieve racial equality in college admissions. That interpretation of the 14th Amendment is not only contrary to precedent and the entire teachings of our history, but it is also grounded in the illusion that racial inequality was a problem of a different generation. She continues, entrenched racial inequality remains a reality today. That is true for society writ large, and more specifically for Harvard and the University of North Carolina, 2 institutions with a long history of racial exclusion. Ignoring race will not equalize a society that is racially unequal. What was true in the 1860s, 1860s, and again in 1954 is true today. Equality requires acknowledgement of inequality.
Yeah, look, guys. In today's climate, what happens is people say, and this has been true for a long time, if you're on a side of an issue, this is either the issue is either 100% correct or 0% correct, and we have to argue it in the extremes. No, in the case of affirmative action, if you take it away, will it hurt some minorities? Yes, it will. Okay, you have to be honest about that, even if you're in favor of taking affirmative action. Why? For example, when California and Texas did it, yes, there were less blacks and Latinos admitted into the top schools. By the way, they got into the lower level schools, okay? And some of those schools are great, like UC Santa Barbara, UC Riverside, etc. But that's okay, but it did happen. It did happen. You can't deny that it didn't happen.
Okay, so let me jump in actually, because look, I think it's actually incredibly important to have diverse campuses, right? And it's not just about equality, it's also about ensuring that all students are exposed to diversity, to different cultures, to people with different backgrounds. That actually enhances your higher education experience. And so some of the states that outlawed, I can't remember exactly which state it was, but one of these states that outlawed affirmative action ended up deciding, okay, in order to fix the lack of diversity problem, all students who are at the top 10% of their graduating class will automatically get admitted to the state colleges, right? Yeah. Which, I mean, that means for anyone who wants that opportunity, it's open for them.
Yeah, and so that's a different way of tackling the problem. I think a better way to tackle it, I would do it purely class-based. But the reason why that works is because, hey, that if you're in a public school, and some of the public schools unfortunately are awful, right? But you made it into the top 10%, that means you're a fighter. You got that exact spirit we're looking for that we think can do amazing things in the world. And a lot of those kids in Texas were Latino, right? But all mixed races, etc. But at least they had a shot within their environment, their school. They excelled, and that shows you the fight they got in them, right? And how they overcome adversity. So I love that. But guys, now let's talk about the downside of affirmative action, or a downside of keeping affirmative action. You get rid of it, yes, you have less representation from some groups, at least in the short term, right? For sure. Now, the downside of keeping it is, so forever we're going to subliminally, subconsciously tell everybody minorities can't make it on their own. They need a boost up. Oh, I hate that. I can't stand that. And that's a poison that gets into all of our heads. And so, look here, another anecdote. So I remember the kids who I thought were the smartest at the schools I went to. I don't know why I remember it, but I do. At Columbia, there was this Orthodox Jewish kid where I thought, wow, that kid's smart, right? And at Penn, I remember talking to, it was a freshman, talking to a black student about science and math. And I was like, I'm never going to know what this guy knows. Super freaking smart. And for whatever reason, it just burrowed into my head. And I remember those two kids, okay? So that black kid who went to Penn, who was a freaking genius, for his whole life, people will look like, oh, how did you get into Penn? Oh, Jesus, that pisses me off to no end, right? And I'm telling you, people are underestimating the poison that idea is, right? That no minority ever earned what they got in this country.
It perpetuates stereotypes.
It 100% perpetuates it. And if you say, hey, people shouldn't think that way, well, I agree with you. But nonetheless, they do. If you think they don't, you're kidding yourself. You know that they think that way, and you think affirmative action, unfortunately, buttresses that in their minds. Last thing, it is also fundamentally unfair to Asians. Okay, it just is. And again, if you're denying that reality, it's absurd to deny it. The minute you take away affirmative action anywhere, the Asian admission rates skyrocket. Okay, why? Is it because Asians are smarter? No, don't be insane, okay? No, because there's a culture of super valuing education, almost to an extreme and almost to a point where I go, I don't know that you're going in the right direction, right?
Yeah.
But having said that, so we're gonna tell all Asians, yeah, even though you guys earned it, we're just not gonna let half of you in because we're trying to do diversity. Look, it's super complicated. Look at all the factors that I just outlined, right? But is that a factor? Yeah, it's a factor that we're being obviously and brazenly unjust to a certain minority group in the country. And in this case, it happens to be Asians.
All right, we're gonna take.
Oh, super last thing, sorry. And for white folks who are like white right-wingers, are like, yeah, finally, man, affirmative action's over, white people are back. I got really bad news for you. Affirmative action was helping you.
Yeah, it's true.
Okay,
it's true.
Without affirmative action, white rates plummet, Asian rates increase. So all those white wingers celebrating today, you're not gonna be celebrating tomorrow. But it is more fair.
All right, we're gonna take a break. When we come back, we've got a massive Biden block for you, including his speech on his economic performance or how the economy is doing under his leadership. We'll also talk about, man, he's had a lot of gaffes over the last few days. We'll talk about those gaffes and what it means for the future. That and more coming up. Don't miss it.
We're gonna do something unique. I'm only gonna read critical comments in this section, and there are plenty. So let's start with our members. Shy Coltrane 42 says, the very same people, Asians, that challenge affirmative action will soon find out that they too will be at the receiving end of the same oppression. Furthermore, this ruling will only further divide and conquer marginalized communities. Yeah, look, again, I obviously don't agree. So number one, it has not worked out that way in places that ended affirmative action. A lot more Asians got admitted, but I don't think it further divides us. It says, hey, everybody has a chance to get in, like we're not doing it based on race. When we do anything based on race, there's often very good reasons why, okay? But it always comes with the baggage of, all right, now we've divided people on race, so they're very likely to fight based on race, okay? So that's my opinion. Kabuki Dragon writes in, you guys are speaking as if the decision is happening in a vacuum and not just a first step in rolling back every single civil rights protection. Context is everything, but in your rush to appear reasonable to the right wing, you're purposely ignoring it. It's okay, guys. These are longtime members and they have as we have genuine opinions, they have genuine opinions.
Can I just, yeah. I'm not gonna, you can address what the statement is, but just like the broader point of us, we have a giant progressive audience. Why would we want to go out of our way to appeal to the right wing when the audience is not going to like it? Isn't that against our own financial interests? But we need to be honest with you guys about what we actually think. I'm not trying to appeal to the right wing, I'm trying to be honest. Man, audience capture is a hell of a drug. You guys want me to lie to you? Is that what they want?
Yeah, okay, guys. So I'll address it more specifically. And Anna's right. We have no financial incentive. What?
Jesus Christ.
There's no right wingers in the audience. What is it? How does it help us? And certainly not going to be subscribers. That's not going to happen. In fact, we'll very likely lose subscribers today. We're perfectly aware of that. But we have to be honest with you guys. That's our main objective. Okay, anyway, in terms of the rolling back civil rights protections, slippery slope slides both ways, okay? So you could say, because I don't want to lose any civil rights protections, then I'm not going to be reasonable on any issue. I'm going to be maximalist on every issue. I don't think that's the right answer. I think the right answer is balance. And the minute they go past your barrier, in my case, this is where my line is, well, then you fight them on that. You don't have to go, okay, then you're right. Let's take away rights for LGBTQ folks. Let's take away rights for these folks or that folks. No, you fight them on that. And you see us doing that every single day. I wish I had time for more comments. We'll do it in the next break. Back on TYT, Cenk and Anna with you guys. Also, Joni Reckert and John, they just joined. And Bruce Salazar, thank you for gifting a membership. We appreciate it. If you'd like to support honest reporting, give us, you can join by hitting the join button below the video on YouTube, or you can go to tyt.com/join. All right, Casper.
All right, well, Biden has been touting his economic policies, and he did so recently. Let's do the story.
I knew we couldn't go back to the same failed policies when I ran. So I came into office determined to change the economic direction of this country, to move from trickle-down economics to what everyone on Wall Street Journal and Financial Times began to call Bidenomics. I didn't come up with the name. I really didn't. I now claim it. But
President Biden touted how the economy is performing under his leadership during a recent speech in Chicago. And what he really emphasized during this speech was his rejection of trickle-down economics. Now, before we do an analysis of how the economy is actually performing, why don't we hear more from his speech and then we'll break it down.
Bidenomics is working. When I took office, the pandemic was raging and our economy was reeling. Supply chains are broken, millions of people unemployed, hundreds of thousands of small businesses on the verge of closing after so many had already closed. Literally hundreds of thousands on the verge of closing. Today, the U.S. has the highest economic growth rate, leading the world economies since the pandemic, the highest in the world. Bidenomics is about building an economy from the middle out and the bottom up, not the top down. Vision is a fundamental break from the economic theory that has failed America's middle class for decades now. It's called trickle-down economics, fundamental economics, trickle down. The idea was, it's belief that we should cut taxes for the wealthy and big corporations. And I know something about big corporations. There's more corporations in Delaware incorporated than every other state in the union combined. I want them to do well, but I'm tired of waiting for the trickle down. It doesn't come very quickly.
We should raise taxes on the wealthy and corporations. That would be a great way of proving that you really are against trickle-down economics. But nonetheless, to be fair, let's take a look at what the economy currently looks like, because there are some metrics you could look at that have certainly improved since Biden took office. The Conference Board said that consumer confidence this month reached the highest level since January of 2022. Unemployment stands near a historic low at 3.7%. The inflation that has plagued Biden's presidency has fallen to 4% from a peak of 9.1% last June. So Cenk, what are your thoughts on, okay, there's the politics of Biden giving this speech, and then there's the reality of what's transpiring with the economy and the actual substance of his speech. So comment on both.
I actually think there's a third factor too. So first off, on the economy, I think it's doing pretty well, and I think that he deserves some credit for it. 3.7% is near historic record low in unemployment. And that's just a fact. And by the way, it's also a fact that Trump did a pretty good job of bringing down unemployment for however much you give presidents credit for the state of the economy, whether they're a Republican president like Trump or a Democratic president like Biden. But Trump brought it from around 5% down to 3.7%. Then during COVID, obviously it spiked. And then Biden brought it all the way back down to 3.7. So that's a great number. Obviously, inflation is not a great number, but a lot of parts of the economy are booming. That's point one. Point two is, I like that Biden is taking credit for it. Politically, that's what you should do. You should brag. I got a great economy. I got a great economy. He calls it Bidenomics. I don't know or care who named it that. If I was him, I'd say, yeah, goddamn right, I named it, right? And I'd brag about it. So check on both of those. Good. Now the third branch is the problematic one, which is that he doesn't mean it. Like that whole speech about trickle-down economics is absurd because Biden is one of the most conservative Democrats economically in American history. That's not fair because there was the racist Dixiecrats, but in my lifetime, okay? And so he has been in favor of trickle-down economics for the past 50 years. So how do I know that? Because I know all of the legislation that has been passed and all of the different things that happened. For example, he helped Mitch McConnell make the Bush tax cuts permanent. And those tax cuts, I've seen the number 94% going to the top 1%, and that's just that the one extreme. The most conservative number was, so this is the best case scenario for Biden. 2/3 of those tax cuts went to the top 20%. Okay, so the enormous majority of the cuts went to the richest people in the country. And that costs us $3 trillion every 10 years. And that was Biden negotiating for Obama in 2013. So don't tell me you're against trickle-down economics when that's what you've done your entire life.
Yeah, you're absolutely right about that. So there are a few other things I wanted to just quickly mention in regard to Biden's economy. First off, look, I think it's important to also be fair, because if Donald Trump were in office right now and we were talking about the unemployment rate, we would of course mention that there's a massive population of people who are unemployed, but they're no longer looking for work, right? So that exists, and that is not calculated into that 3.7% unemployment rate figure. So
okay, that's fair, but it was never calculated in.
No, it was never calculated in, but I just want to be clear that that unemployment rate is not, it doesn't give you the full picture. But still, it's an incredibly low unemployment rate. With that said, there are other issues. Prices are still rising significantly faster than the Federal Reserve's target of 2%, a worry for voters and a line of attack for Republican lawmakers and other presidential candidates. So inflation is still impacting workers. We need to keep it real. Wages have not kept up with inflation since the late 1970s, and the current minimum wage is $7.25. It is not, the federal minimum wage has not been updated since 2009. It was implemented in 2009, but it was the Bush administration that had raised the minimum wage last. So that's just giving you a fuller picture. There are other issues as well. So for instance, if you look at the polling, the majority of Americans do not have a favorable view of Biden's economy, and it's because of what they're experiencing within their households. Housing is still unaffordable and unattainable for many people. They're dealing with that. So all of those issues also play a role. It's just that the metrics that the news media tends to look at, the government tends to look at, has more to do with GDP, has more to do with the stock market, the unemployment rate, yes, but there are other metrics that I think give you a more holistic picture of how the economy is impacting ordinary Americans.
Okay, and if you're thinking, hey, wait, now you talk about Biden's record for the last 50 years, and he's been very conservative economically, and he used to be known, remember how he just talked about the corporations in Delaware? The credit cards are all based in Delaware, and an old credit card company was called MBNA. And Biden used to be known as the senator from MBNA. So he has helped these corporations and the very wealthy his entire career. But you say, okay, Cenk, but wait a minute, let's be fair. How about lately? I mean, the economy's doing pretty well. Maybe he did well as a president. That defines his rest of his record. Well, let's take a look. So remember, Trump brought down the top rate for corporations from 35% to 21%. And Biden said, oh no, I'm gonna stick it to the man. I'm gonna be for the average guy. I'm gonna bring it back to 28%. What do you mean bring it back to 28%? It was at 35. So already Biden's telling you, nah, I wanna make the tax cuts that Trump did for corporations as permanent as possible. Because if I solidify them at 28 as a Democrat, they'll never move past that, up, right? And then Manchin goes, no, I don't think 28% is right. I think it should be 25%. That's 10 points lower than what it used to be before Trump, right? And Biden goes, pretty good idea. We'll see how we negotiate and compromise. And they did. And you know what it's at now? 21%. They didn't move it an inch. And is Biden planning to change that? I mean, gives a fiery speech about trickle down economics. He's gonna propose tomorrow. Now, God damn it, I'll bring it back to 35%. No, he's not even gonna try. He's perfectly happy to have it at 21%. He didn't lift a finger to change that. And so understand, and this is a thing that if you watch mainstream media, it'll blow you away. This fact I'm about to tell you. Politicians lie. They lie all the time, including Democrats. Okay, if you watch mainstream media, you know that the Republicans are liars, and they are. But the idea that a Democratic leader like Joe Biden or Nancy Pelosi might lie is heresy, heresy. All he does is lie. And so, yeah. And the mainstream media assiduously hides the facts that we just shared with you. They're facts, you can look them up, but they never talk about them in regards to Joe Biden.
So, full disclosure, as I was researching and producing this story, I was planning on going after Biden, intervening and preventing the rail workers from striking. Remember, they were they were about to strike because they just wanted to secure some paid time off to deal with family emergencies, medical emergencies, things like that. When the rail companies refused to do so, they were planning to strike, but Biden got involved and prevented them from doing so. Well, it turns out that behind the scenes, he continued pushing the rail companies in order to secure paid time off for the rail workers. And I read today, I wish that this was something that he actually marketed, talked about, advertised, because he deserves credit for it. He and his administration continued pushing the companies, and they did in fact secure paid time off for the rail workers. So he does deserve credit for that as well. And I'm giving you that full disclosure because again, I planned on coming on the show today and going after him for that, but he did continue pushing the rail companies to do the right thing.
So guys, this is exactly what we're talking about when we say we don't live in a black and white world. So generally, I'm deeply frustrated by Biden. I think he's gotten way too much credit from the press, which I think is totally absurd. But having said that, look at what a mixed bag this is. So are we supposed to pretend that the rail workers did not get the days off? But they did, and Biden did help them behind the scenes.
That's right.
Biden's National Labor Relations Board is actually really strong.
That's right.
Okay, and you got to give him credit for that. On the other hand, whenever anybody's threatening a mass strike, the first guy out the door is Biden saying, "Don't do it," and I will support the corporate point of view. Well, what are you doing that for, right? And regulations, he wouldn't regulate a business if his life depended on it. So he's given corporations so much, and I would argue all the bills were structured to help corporate donors. So which one is it? Do you guys hate Biden or do you love Biden? No,
it's complicated, like every issue. Everything is far more nuanced and far more complicated. Nothing is, I wish things were as simple as good, bad, black or white, but they're not.
So our job is to bring you things that are true. And anyone who always lands on one side or another, whether it's a person, a politician that they're analyzing or a policy that they're analyzing, they always land on one side or another. That shows you they're not being honest. Like, oh, I don't like Biden, so I'm only gonna tell you the negative things about Biden. I like Biden, I'm only gonna tell you the positive things about Biden. No, he has both. And if everybody was honest in media, you would know both.
Now, I do want to give you the exact numbers in the polls regarding how Americans actually feel about Biden's economic accomplishments. This is a poll that was done by AP, the Associated Press, and NORC. So apparently 1 in 3 US adults approve of his economic leadership. That 34% figure is even lower than his overall approval rating of 41%, and that's according to the survey by the Associated Press and NORC Center for Public Affairs Research. Overall, just 30% of US adults say they think the national economy is good, which is up slightly from the 25% who said so just last month. And when you look at the Democratic base specifically, pretty significant chunk of the Democratic base is unhappy with the economy, although the majority of Democrats are happy with it. So 72% within his party say they approve of his handling of the job overall, but just 60% say they approve of his handling of the economy. So I think that what explains that more than anything is how inflation, especially in regard to housing, in regard to everyday goods that people need, that is what is probably impacting their opinion of Biden's economy. But to say that he's done nothing good, I think would be a lie. It is a mixed bag, and I hope we did a decent job kind of explaining all that for you. All right, you wanna move on?
Yep.
All right, let's do it. This is gonna be an awkward and uncomfortable story, but let's talk about Biden's recent gaffes, all within the last few days.
Twice this week, President Biden has referred to the war in Ukraine as the war in Iraq. I don't have to tell you, he has been facing doubts from voters about his age. He is the oldest president, of course, in the nation's history that we've ever had. One of those instances happened as he was leaving the White House today. What do you say to people who are concerned about his age and slip-ups like the one he had today?
Well, we'll get to Pete Buttigieg's response to that in just a moment. But first, maybe we should get into what the gaffes were. One of the instances this week actually featured President Biden mixing up Russia and Iraq. Let's watch.
To what extent has Vladimir Putin been weakened by recent events? It's hard to tell, but he's clearly losing the war in Iraq. He's losing the war at home.
So the audio was not great considering the helicopter in the background, or at least what sounded like a helicopter. So I'll read you the transcript. A reporter asked him specifically, to what extent has Vladimir Putin been weakened by recent events? Biden responds, it's hard to tell, but he is clearly losing the war in Iraq. He is losing the war at home.
Yeah, that's the second time he's made that same exact mistake, confusing Ukraine for Iraq.
Over the last 2 days.
And when you make the mistake the first time, I guarantee you, your staff sits you down and says, please, Mr. President, do not do that again. That is greatly deleterious to your campaign. And nonetheless, he couldn't help himself and he did it again the very next day. And there's more where that came from.
Yes, in fact, just today, he also mixed up the Constitution with the Declaration of Independence while on MSNBC. Let's watch.
What I think the Constitution says, we hold these truths to be self. All men and women are created equal, endowed by their Creator. It's the uniqueness of America. We never fully lived up to it. We never walked away from it. And this court seems to say that no, that's not always the case.
So President Biden was reacting to the Supreme Court's ruling on affirmative action. That's the context of the discussion. He referenced the Constitution when he should have referenced the Declaration of Independence.
Yeah, so that's a more common mistake. I'm not sure that it even belongs in this category, especially given the context of the former president, Donald Trump, who would say, it says the box of Fruity Pebbles says all men are endowed as large as they want. Okay. No, that's none of that is true. Okay, so compared to the guy who thought we should inject ourselves with disinfectant to cure COVID, Biden still looks like a genius. But there's a worse one. You got the Modi one?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. Okay, so this week he also mixed up India and China. So let's get to, I think this tweet describes it perfectly. So both last night at a fundraiser, then again this morning at the White House, Biden referred to Ukraine as Iraq and said, my new best friend, the Prime Minister of China, before correcting himself to say the Prime Minister of India. So he was referring to Narendra Modi, who is of course the Prime Minister of India, but referred to him as the Prime Minister of China. So look, sometimes when we do the show, since it's not scripted, we're not on a teleprompter, we will think one thing, but we'll misspeak. That happens time to time. That's totally normal. But it's happening regularly with Biden. These are all gaffes within the same week.
Yeah, no, guys, he's in trouble. Come on, keep it real, keep it real. So a week or 2 weeks ago, he had that, I don't know if you want to call it a gaffe, whatever you want to call it, but at the end of one of his speeches, he said, God save the Queen, right? And so in the beginning, before I heard the full explanation, I was like, we got to pull him right now, right? But as it turns out, he says that every once in a while. He's been saying that for years. Not every time, but sparingly at the end of his speech. It's like a matter of speaking, like the way he says malarkey. Sometimes he just says it like, God save the Queen, right? But when people are questioning whether you have dementia and the Queen's already dead, I don't think you should go back to that line. Right? So context matters within the context of Joe Biden making these gaffe after gaffe. And again, remember that one more important piece of context that leans in the other direction for Joe Biden is that he's made gaffes his whole life.
That's true, that's right? A really good point. That is a good point.
Like, so he would say absurd things like, hey, go into a 7-Eleven and you can't find one that isn't owned by an Indian. You know what I'm saying? Like, no, Joe, don't say that. And that was like 20 years ago.
I don't know if that's a gaffe. It's more of a just lapse in judgment over what you think is humorous or funny or whatever?
Yeah, sure. And I mean, he's got corn pop. He's got all these weird things that Biden does. And that's okay. Before it was quirky and he gave him character. Now it feels very different. And guys, it's not like just the corn pop story, which miraculously turned out to be true, etc.
The Mandela stuff.
The lies are different. Lies are just political, right? Yeah. So, but in this case, it is a great number of massive screw ups in the midst of people questioning how old you are and whether you have dementia. It is I mean, if it's not actually dementia or whatever, some form of that, it, at least in terms of politics and optics, looks disastrous.
So what do we do and what does he do, right? Because, okay, so let's also be fair. So I'm considering how exhausted I would be if I had his schedule. If I had to do the travel that he does, if I had to if I have to do one meeting a day, like I'm pulling my hair out. Like I hate meetings, so that's what it's really about. But exhaustion has an impact on you as well, right? So he's up there in age. He has a physically and mentally taxing schedule as president of the United States, as you would expect.
Yeah.
So I don't like, and also like, I don't know what to do with this information. You get what I'm saying? Like, what's the course of action?
No, I do. So, okay, but that doesn't mean it's realistic or gonna happen. But so first of all, in terms of the taxing schedule, it depends, right? As Buttigieg said, no, when we do meetings, he'll ask questions.
Let's actually go to that video because I promised you that we would get to Pete Buttigieg providing cover for Biden, and that's exactly what he does in this clip. Let's watch.
You could be in a room with him the way I often am, seeing how he is simultaneously focused on a big picture vision and very focused on details. I'll tell you, we've had, for example, meetings on some of the work that we've been doing with rail infrastructure, where he winds up drilling in on questions so detailed. We have to go back and set up another meeting or pull in experts from Amtrak to help satisfy the president's desire for detailed information and his focus on how that connects up into the bigger picture.
So Cenk, was that convincing at all?
No, it was the opposite. So guys, I think we have an extraordinarily low bar for people in power.
We do.
Like, he's like, look, he's the president of the United States, the most powerful man on earth. And he asks questions. Oh, does he? What else does Joe do? He just dives into details. What's your expectation? That the president gets a briefing and doesn't ask any questions and doesn't ask about the details? Are you expecting the president to be a moron? Of course you ask questions. Of course you ask about the details. So sorry, no, that is not 1% impressive. And every president is different. Bill Clinton worked his ass off. Barack Obama was by all accounts incredibly hardworking. On the other hand, Trump didn't do anything. He just watched Fox News all day long. Don't tell me how taxing the presidency is by definition. So anyways, so I'm not at all convinced by that. But look, so what can we do about it? I know what the right answer is. It's just no one's got the courage to do it. I'm being honest, okay? The right answer is someone really strong goes into the race and pushes Biden out, because Biden is being obstinate. And honestly, like sometimes a sign of dementia is being stubborn and will not change your mind under any circumstance, right? But you know what'll change your mind? If you're polling third and you're the sitting president, you're gonna leave the race because you don't want to get embarrassed. But we can't, I mean, Marianne and RFK Jr. are in the race. God bless Marianne. I think she has a lot of courage, and that's why she's in there, but it hasn't worked in pushing him out. So it has to be someone who can do it. And there, we batting as zero, a flat out zero. Not one person will go in the race and push him out. And so if you're mad, honestly, be mad at every other Democrat, everyone else on the left in the whole country, because no one will do what is obviously the correct thing to do.
When we come back from the break, we'll talk about how Mayor Eric Adams decided to imply that an elderly white woman was racist when she asked a very legitimate question about raising rent prices in the city. So that and more when we come back.
Back to critical comments. Let's go to YouTube super chat. The Breaker Wall says, Cenk, you agree with Clarence Thomas of affirmative action being a burden on minorities as written in his book that internalizes the racist narrative. No, I don't think it internalizes the racist narrative. It worries about the racist narrative, right? And it recognizes that it exists in our society, and I don't want to add to that narrative. I want to detract from that narrative. And if you say it's wrong to agree with Clarence Thomas on anything, brother, I love you, but I don't agree, okay? And so Clarence Thomas might love steak. I love steak. That doesn't make steak bad. It doesn't make Clarence Thomas wrong on that. You know the standard cliches. Adolf Hitler was a vegetarian. Does that make all vegetarians guilty? Don't be ridiculous, right? Now, having said that, am I uncomfortable ever being on Clarence Thomas' side? Yes, I am. So you got me on that one. Athletes LLC says, don't agree, brother. For every law that allows equality and progress, the powers that be are too scared of minority progress and make more laws to set progress back. Even though they know minorities are way behind, how do we catch up when the game is rigged? So I think we catch up. All of these are good points. I think we catch up by pushing for the right laws and not laws that are counterproductive. So for example, so here, I'll give you one. On pot, we smoke pot at the same rate, white, black, every race smokes it at about exactly the same rate. And black folks are arrested at 4 times the rate. So that is overt, ridiculous, systemic racism. So for example, if we're Democrats, we should be fighting super hard to get rid of that injustice, okay? Because that actually takes away opportunities from all those people who were wrongly arrested, et cetera, et cetera. That is something where then you go to take it to the American people. Guys, we smoke it at the same rate, they get arrested 4 times the rate. Everybody knows that's unfair. That's winning ground. You fight on winning ground, you win, gives you leverage and momentum to win the next battle and the next battle and the next battle. When you choose to fight on losing ground, it loses your leverage and power, and then you can't even win on the ones where you're right 4-1. So, but these are all like political and strategic differences. God bless. And if you see it slightly differently, there's nothing wrong with that. Carissimo says, Jake, you can't compare any person's experience, including yours, to people who were enslaved for 250 plus years, discriminated against for 160 years after that, and uniquely discriminated against today. Well, there's a lot of truth to that, and that is very relevant in a great number of policy issues. But if what we did was, if you take the other extreme though and say, since that is true, we should have whole different laws in every category for black people, Latinos, and all these different races, right? You're gonna set up a society based purely on race, and that doesn't help minorities, that hurts minorities. So you've got, it's a complicated issue with upsides, downsides, et cetera. And so but at the same time, black people, black families on average have nearly only 10% of the accumulated wealth of white families. That is a massive problem. That's a problem we need to tackle as a society. And there's different ways to tackle that problem. So you're not wrong about the cancer. I just have different cures for it. And there's nothing wrong with different opinions on how to cure that cancer. We'll be back. All right, back on TYT, Cenk and Anna with you, and also Dami Mami Matrix, that's funny, fun. Eddie Kwawa, Mega Ironica, I think that's the same person. Anyway, and Bruce Elzar didn't give just 1 membership, wound up gifting 21. So Bruce, American hero, we appreciate it. Everybody, come be a member of the Young Turks, help us do honest reporting. Hit the join button below the video on YouTube or tyt.com/join. We appreciate it. Casper.
All right, this story's insane. New York City Mayor Eric Adams implied that an elderly white woman who had an important question to ask about unaffordable rents was speaking to him in a racist manner. In fact, he compared her to a plantation owner after she raised concerns about unaffordable rent. Now, before I show you the video, and stick around for it, I do want to give you the context so you understand where this woman is coming from. She has a legitimate concern, and she is representing the concerns of countless New Yorkers who are concerned about rents increasing. So landlords will be able to increase rent by 3% on 1-year leases. They will also be able to increase rent by 2.75% for the first year on 2-year leases and 3.2% for a second year. The rent increases apply to new leases signed on or after October 1st of 2023. So this has to do with the rent stabilized units in the city. There are about 1 million of them. And there is a board that makes a decision as to how much rent can be increased at any given time. Now, a woman stood up to ask a question about this. She is noticeably frustrated with good reason. This has to do with housing. This has to do with people being able to live in a safe place. And Eric Adams was not amused by it. Let's watch.
Before and after the use of force of those rent increases, in natural, they have a 0% rent increase. Why in New York City, where the real estate is controlling you, Mr. Mayor, why are we having these horrible rent increases last year and this year?
Okay, first, if you're going to ask a question, don't point at me and don't be disrespectful to me. I'm the mayor of this city, and treat me with the respect I deserve to be treated. I'm speaking to you as an adult. Don't stand in front like you treated someone that's on the plantation that you own.
Isn't it so wonderful when someone asks you a question that makes you uncomfortable, you could just weaponize race to shut her down? That's exactly what happened there.
So this one has a little bit of nuance, not a lot. So the little bit of nuance is, yeah, it's true that a lot of times some folks talk down to minorities and they do it in a way that is grating on the nerves in every imaginable way. It's happened to me a little bit, but my God, I've seen it happen to black people in a way that is maddening, okay? So that's your context, and I get it. At the same time, when you become a representative of the people, you must be accountable to the people. And you can't just say, oh, okay, you've got a problem with rent. How dare you talk back to me? I deserve respect. Nah, okay. And to me, put aside the race thing for a second. The whole concept, and it is pervasive in America, that politicians deserve a lot of respect. I loathe it. I don't think they deserve that at all, at all. And I've seen people go into Congress and then all of a sudden say, I'm a congresswoman or I'm a congressman now. Who gives a damn? You're the same person, right? And they get this air about them like they're big deal. No, you're supposed to be a servant of the people. You're not supposed to lord over the people and be like, I am more powerful and I have more status than you. How dare you ask me an impertinent question and point your finger at me? No, we all get to point our fingers at the politicians and ask, why haven't you done your goddamn job? And are you kidding me? Like, you're getting upset about someone asking about rent being too high in New York City? I mean, how fragile is your ego? If you can't handle that, you shouldn't be mayor of New York.
So he claims that, he has nothing to do with the decision that was made by the Rent Guidelines Board, that he has absolutely no say. I would venture to say that the mayor of the city could, apply some pressure and look out for the people of New York. But he claims that hands off, I have no say in this whatsoever. That's his argument, he insists. Now, I do want to give you some numbers in regard to what Americans are dealing with when it comes to the housing crisis and the unaffordable nature of rent. So this is the highest percentage of New Yorkers facing an affordability crisis in the 23-year history of a study that was done. So according to the study, let's just go back and I'll give you the details on that. There was a study released in April that showed that half of all households in New York don't make enough money to cover basic needs like housing. Okay, so according to the analysis, this is the highest percentage of New Yorkers facing an affordability crisis in the 23-year history of the study, and also marks a significant degradation of life quality since 2021. When the organization's report found that 36% of working age households weren't making ends meet. Listen, people are working their asses off in this country, okay? Working overtime, long hours, barely making enough money to afford housing, okay? They did everything right, they followed all the rules, and they can't even afford to put a roof over their heads. Goddamn right they're angry. And for any politician, anyone who signed up for this, who ran to sit in the seat that Eric Adams is in right now, to deflect and immediately imply that someone is racist because she dare ask you a question in an aggressive way, I'll grant him that, in an aggressive way, about this very real and serious issue, it's just infuriating. I'm sick of all of it, okay? I'm sick of these politicians who run for public office, run to be public servants, and end up being anything but.
Yeah, so look, a lot of times in my life, I have gotten either subtly or over the top overtly, you don't belong here. Okay, so I know how that feels. I know exactly how that feels. So I have sympathy for that. But if you become an elected representative, you must represent those people. And you must take their criticism. Look, we do a talk show here, and we take your guys' criticism all the time, right? And we deal with it, and we explain it, we agree, we explain the parts we agree and disagree, etc. You can't go around saying, how dare you bring up a perfectly legitimate issue and a critique of me, and then hide behind any issue, but yes, including race. And you say, oh, you can't, what do you mean hide behind race? That's outrageous. What do you mean? You think Clarence Thomas didn't hide behind race? When he was accused credibly of sexual harassment, what did he do? The guy who denies that racism exists at all of a sudden called it a high-tech lynching. See, that's hiding behind your race. Okay, so it can happen and it does happen. And I think in this case, Eric Adams did do that.
Can we just, for a second, acknowledge the power dynamic in this exchange?
Yeah.
He's the mayor of New York City. Let's just consider that power dynamic. That's it, okay? I mean, we're not talking about some rich, privileged white woman who comes across an impoverished black person and yells at him for no reason. This is a powerful man. He is the mayor of the largest city in this country, and she has a legitimate concern and is representing a concern for countless New Yorkers. To brush her off as someone who just sounds like a plantation owner so you don't have to answer the question, pretty gross.
And he didn't, he never answered the question. And so, look, here, again, I'll use myself as an example, and it's not at all an exaggeration. I've literally had somebody grab me by the elbow and walk me out of a place saying you don't belong here, okay? So, having said that, if I become the mayor of New York City, I don't get to say that anymore because I have achieved a status of power, and my job is to use that power on behalf of all of the citizens and not to make excuses. And also context matters. Now let me give you the other side of the context. Every mayor of New York City is pointed at and yelled at. I mean, Eric Adams, who is actually a moderate to conservative Democrat, you wanna see somebody getting yelled at, Bill de Blasio was yelled at. The former mayor of New York, who is a more progressive Democrat, was yelled at and pointed at 1,000 times, 10,000 times. So are mayors of New York yelled at? Hell yeah, they are. I mean, come on, it's comical, it's comical. It's New York City. If you can't handle a constituent and you won't answer a question and you come up with a lame excuse like that, that's embarrassing.
By the way, last week, Eric Adams vetoed a package of 4 bills by the New York City Council that would have expanded the city's rental voucher program. Maybe that's why he immediately went to the race card to essentially avoid having to answer any questions. Anyway, we gotta take a break. We come back for the second hour of the show. We'll talk about just how popular House Speaker Kevin McCarthy's plot to cut Social Security really is. Later, we'll also discuss, I don't know, what else do we have going on, Cenk? We'll talk about how the Koch brothers have raised tens of millions of dollars to defeat Trump in the primaries. We'll give you that and more coming up.
You're about to watch some behind the scenes footage of the Young Turks. Ooh. Now these are partial videos. If you want to get all of them, you become a member, go to tyt.com/join, and you'll get all the behind the scenes of me, Anna, John, JR, a little bit reality show like. tyt.com/join and enjoy this. You know what you're seeing behind me? Jersey, hold. Watch me flip this camera. However I flip it. Do I flip it like this? No, I just took a picture. I'm bitzing right now.
What?
Behind the scenes.
Oh, okay. For members? I don't have my face on.
She doesn't have her face on, folks. Oh, that's JR's ass right there.
You can't take 5 minutes off, can you?
No, I can't, Johnny Pie. I said it was live stream, but I was lying. It's not a live stream. It's just for members. Bitsy, this is my cat. You know what his name is? Kiki Cat.
Animals are innocent.
Control room and the insanity is obviously there.
Right now, as you can see, I'm directing or tech directing. I'm so happy to be here.
This is what like a Labor Day beard looks like for Cenk. Man, you're a Young Turks viewer if you recognize me like this.
Such a big fan.
Oh, thank you. You are the one person in my life I would love to meet.
What's going on, guys? This is a Bitsy or a BTS or behind the scenes with Hassan Piker, AKA Woke Bay.
Oh, hi, I didn't see you there.
I have finished my show, The Damage Report, and now I get into a really awkward time of the day.
When I'm sitting The control room is right there. So I can see Bart.
This is the Pittsburgh office, by the way. I'll refer to often as the boiler room.
You see how it's ripped? Is it super unprofessional to wear that at a business meeting? Or am I like cool, rebel?
I just finished doing the power panel and I'm fired up.
What do you do for TYT?
Not a whole lot.
If you're frantically tweeting at us that something's broken, thank you, because I'm fixing it.
And thank you for being a TYT member.
Super last thing, because there's always got to be a super last thing. Oh, that was disastrous. This has been behind the scenes, behind the scenes.
Welcome to Indisputable. I'm your host, Dr. Rashad Richard. We got a lot happening today. But what do we do on this show? We tell the truth. You know why we tell the truth? Because the truth is simply indisputable.
Rashad, great to be here. Congratulations on the new show. And I gotta let everybody know that Rashad and I go way back.
Here's the pattern that we see in all of these Karen stories. They think they own stuff they do not own. Now, where does that come from? I don't know, maybe slavery. Maybe they think they should still own black people.
This is what happens when Karens weaponize the police.
When you're used to privilege, equality seems like oppression.
It hits you in a certain way when someone is holding you against your will, treating you like you're a criminal and you're an innocent person. This is something that black people face no matter where they are.
A stronger black economy lends itself to a stronger, greater economy. Don't think it's exclusive of you, it's inclusive of you.
What's your beef with critical race theory?
It adds more fuel to the fire of the racist tendencies that we already have.
We have a generation of problem solvers that can remedy the problem if they are properly taught what the problem is.
You know who created redlining in this country? The white liberal.
I don't give a damn who created it. If it's a racist policy, Shelley, here's what I don't know. I don't know. See, there you go filibustering, brother. You're scared of this truth, but you're gonna get it, though.
We've been around for about 20 years and we have about 20 billion views. Am I proud of that? Hell yeah, I am. We put out 20 billion messages in a bottle. Have we helped to move now 2 generations, millennials and Gen Z, to become progressive? Yes, those numbers are real. We moved generations. Were we the only ones? Of course not. But we have been the largest online news show for now decades. All right, back on TYT, Jank Anna, Mark Vicious LVL, and look at Joe Winter gifting 10 Young Turks memberships on YouTube. We appreciate it, guys. You're awesome. Way to look out for the community, way to look out for each other. You can join us and help us do this program. We can't do it without you by either hitting the join button below the video on YouTube or tyt.com/join. All right, Casper.
Well, Social Security is still something that the GOP is focusing on. They want to cut it. So let's talk about what McCarthy's up to.
I was elected to help lead this nation. So the first thing we did, open the House up. The bills, you now get to see them before you ever vote on them. And now we're cutting. And you know what? I'm going to make some people uncomfortable by doing that. But I'm not going to give up on the American people. And this isn't the end. This doesn't solve all the problems. This is the first step. I'm going to announce a commission coming forward from the speaker, from bipartisan on both sides of the aisle. We only got to look at 11% of the budget to find these cuts. We have to look at the entire budget.
Someone needs to do a wellness check on House Speaker Kevin McCarthy because he's currently engaging in political suicide while he attempts to cut Social Security and Medicare, and that is what he's talking about in that interview. New polling suggests that the majority of Americans, including Republican voters, do not want that. So before we get to the results of that poll, it's important to understand what the GOP is currently plotting, what the idea is behind cutting Social Security and privatizing Medicare. So apparently earlier this month, a panel comprised of 3/4 of House Republicans released a budget proposal that would raise the Social Security retirement age, cutting benefits across the board. They also wanted to privatize Medicare and slash taxes on the rich. So the proposal outlined by the 175-member Republican Study Committee, led by Representative Kevin Hern from Oklahoma, would gradually raise Social Security's full retirement age, the age at which people are eligible for full Social Security benefits, to 69, up from the current level of 67 for those born in 1960 or later. Now, far from raising taxes on the rich, the Republican Study Committee budget calls for massive tax cuts by proposing a permanent extension of the individual tax provisions of the 2017 Trump GOP tax law. The Congressional Budget Office has estimated that such a move would add 2.5 trillion to the federal deficit over the next decade. So understand what they're doing here. The argument that you hear from the GOP over and over and over again is, oh my God, the Social Security program, it's not gonna be solvent pretty soon. So we gotta do something, we gotta raise the retirement age. But in reality, they wanna do these cuts in order to justify tax cuts for the rich. That is what they want to do. That is who they've always been. And Americans aren't having it. I'm gonna give you the polling in just a moment, but Cenk, what are your thoughts?
Okay, this one shows their hand completely. And I'm a bit shocked that the Democrats aren't talking about this 24/7.
They should.
Yeah, I mean, they'll wisen up as Democrats usually do about a year from now. And as the election gets closer, that's when they'll panic and be like, wait, we were supposed to be fighting for people. Oh right, it's now it affects us and our power. Let's hurry up and talk about the issues that matter. So in this case, they're proposing significant cuts to Social Security and Medicare. That's a death knell. We'll show you the polling in a second. If anyone bothered to, you would only propose those if you think your opponents are the weakest people alive. Because that is political suicide if you thought there's anyone on the other side. They must think that the Democratic Party is a ghost ship.
Right, let me just elaborate on that more, because in order for this incredibly unpopular proposal to result in political suicide, you would need the opponents to campaign on it.
100%, so far I haven't heard a peep.
Me either.
It's insanity. Anyway, like I said, they'll figure it out right before the election. But now, the other parts of it to me show their hand even more. They say, okay, this is deficit reduction. We really need to do this to cut. We got to cut from Social Security and Medicare, and we got to cut taxes on the rich. Wait, I thought you were doing deficit reduction. Sometimes when you're playing poker, this is a very rare move, that somebody will literally show you their hand to see your reaction, right? That's what they're doing here. They're like, we're for the rich. That's our hand. What are you gonna do? I mean, this is literally saying, let's do wealth redistribution. Let's take from the poor, the needy, and the senior citizens and give it to the richest people in the country.
That's exactly right, yeah.
That's so brazen. By the way, Democratic Party, God damn it. Anyway, one more thing though, Anna, in showing their hand. On top of that, they added, we're gonna repeal the thing where you can negotiate drug prices on a couple of pills. So we don't want you negotiating any drug prices. We want them to be as high as possible.
Yeah, that's right.
That's saying I work for the drug companies, and this is the right wingers, the ones who are like, oh yeah, we shouldn't take the vaccine because of dirty big pharma, right? And now they're representatives. All of them are saying, no, we love big pharma. They stuffed our pockets full of money, so now we're gonna give them even more leverage, so you have to pay higher drug prices. This is saying we're the bad guys.
Are we the baddies? Yeah, no, 100%. And look, you just mentioned the pharmaceutical drugs and how they do not want Medicare to negotiate drug prices. In addition to that, they want to further privatize the Medicare system. We've talked about Medicare Advantage and how that's the privatized model of Medicare. It is privately run but publicly funded. Well, they want to kind of expand that, and they want to turn the entire Medicare system into a privatized voucher system. The RSC budget targets Medicare with a premium support model that would subsidize private insurance plans, effectively transforming Medicare into a voucher program, which of course is an idea from former House Speaker Paul Ryan. The GOP proposal also demands work requirements for all federal benefit programs and sides with the pharmaceutical industry in calling for the repeal of the Inflation Reduction Act provisions aimed at lowering drug costs. Now that you get a full look at what the House Republican leadership is up to and what they actually want to accomplish here, let's see what the American people think about this, how they feel about these cuts and privatizing Medicare. So this new poll was done by Data for Progress, and here's what they found. 72% of likely voters, including 78% of Democrats, 72% of independents, and 65% of Republicans either somewhat or strongly oppose this move.
Guys, 76% of Americans say that you should increase Social Security benefits, even if it means raising taxes on the rich. More than 3/4 of the country. Now the Republicans propose the exact opposite. No, we're gonna cut from Social Security and Medicare, the two most popular programs in America right now and in American history. We're gonna cut from those and give to the rich instead. So I'm telling you, it's a slap across the face of the Democratic Party saying, we don't think you even exist. Because if you guys put in 1% effort, I'm showing you a 2-3 unsuited, and I bet you fold. Okay, that's the move that McCarthy's doing here. Now, remember that moment in Biden's State of the Union where he said they plan to cut Social Security and Medicare? They were like, oh, no way, blah, blah. And then he's like, oh, good, you don't want to cut it? Good, we have a deal, right? That was like an interesting, nice little moment, and everybody thought, Biden got him. Did he? Because here they are, where's Biden? Biden should be doing like a fire-breathing press conference. He should have done it as soon as they proposed it. Here we are, however many weeks later, right? And he still hasn't done anything about it.
So look, Biden just yesterday was in Chicago giving a speech to tout what he has done for the economy. We did analysis on that. It's a mixed bag, but nonetheless, politically, Biden seems to have the right idea. Right, because by focusing on the economy, the issue that impacts American voters the most, let's keep it real, it shows that his head is in the right place, and maybe, just maybe, he's now going to pivot to attacking his opponents by focusing on what they're actually proposing on Social Security and Medicare. We'll see, but I think politically speaking, his decision to talk about the economy in that recent speech was a good decision.
Yeah, I agree with that. All right, and one more thing, guys. So the Republicans always show you their hand, to be fair to them, right? So they said, okay, what's their top priority? McCarthy said before the election and after the election, well, if we get into office, we're gonna cut the IRS agents that are auditing rich people. That's your #1 priority? Okay, thank you for telling me who you are. And so those cuts, by the way, cost the budget 6 times what they would bring in 6 times more money through those audits. And so it greatly increases the deficit by doing that. But I put this a whole bunch of quotes in my book, Justice is Coming. You can get it at tyt.com/justice, where Republicans and donors brazenly say, they said it during the Trump era and they've said it in the past, where they're like, no, I paid them for results, so they better cut my taxes, otherwise I'm not gonna give them any more money. Or they better get rid of Obamacare, otherwise I'm not gonna give them any more money. And Republicans like Lindsey Graham and others, they go, well, I mean, they would stop giving us money if we didn't do what they said. They just admit it, they say it publicly. And by the way, that leads to the last statement, which is the other folks that are culpable here is mainstream media. So they say it on the record. Have you seen the mainstream media going nuts covering? I mean, they'll cover Eminem gender for like months on end. Have you seen round-the-clock coverage of how the Republicans are threatening to cut the most popular programs in American history?
Nope.
I've seen almost none. So gives you a sense of their priorities. In reality, when it comes to economic issues, usually Republicans, Democrats, and mainstream media and right-wing media, they all agree you should get screwed and rich people like them should get everything. But in this case, the Republicans have gone over the top. So you vote for them at your own peril. They say and they promise they're coming for your Social Security and Medicare.
When we come back from the break, we'll talk about how the Koch brothers are launching a war against Donald Trump but I think it might actually end up helping Trump. I'll explain how and why when we come back from the break.
All right, back on TYT. All right, now we'll do a mix of comments, critical and positive. Athletes LLC on YouTube Super Chat said, I still respect TYT, but the playing field is not level. I guess the question is how we get to equality faster. Your opinion, although practical, is a long, hard road to equality. Affirmative action gets to equality faster. Love you all. So Athletes LLC, I hear what you're saying, and a lot of what you're saying is true. One is short term and one is long term. Generally speaking, I always believe in long term answers because that builds the foundation, right? So your house is not wobbly, and you could build layers on top of that. But if you start in the wrong direction, it's harder to fix. But anyways, this one's a little bit of a mixed bag because affirmative action was starting in the right direction in the beginning. It's just disagreement about when to end it. But Athletes LLC, after writing in those things where he disagrees or they disagree, then gifted 50 Young Turks memberships. So love you, okay? And that's how we do it, okay? We can agree, we can disagree, but we're family, we're a community, and we work together. All right, now let's go to a critical comment. Me being me 24 says, by the way, Anna, we're not trying to capture you. We need you to understand that just because you and Cenk have been correct on reporting doesn't make you two arbiters of the fight.
No.
Wait, hold on, can I answer it?
Yep.
And the fight has changed, politics are different. So look guys, by the nature of doing a talk show, we appear to be arbiters, right? But all we're doing is sharing our opinion, right? And we fully acknowledge that you have an opinion. In terms of audience capture, it doesn't mean you guys are trying to capture us. It just means how do you react to an audience's genuine reaction, right? So for example, I always give this one, during the Obama administration in the beginning, I realized, oh no, he's doing conservative things economically, like Gulf drilling, and I said it, and I knew that we would lose members, but we didn't want to, I didn't even know the term audience capture back then. But the audience wasn't trying to capture us. They were genuinely mad that I was criticizing Obama. And they thought maybe I'm going to become right wing or a Republican.
Okay.
Now that never happened, but it was a genuine reaction, sorry.
Okay, it was addressed to me, so let me answer it, okay? I have no problem with people disagreeing with me. I have a problem with someone implying that I'm actively trying to appeal to right wingers because I have an opinion that the person who wrote in disagrees with. Okay, so if you're gonna come at me with ridiculous allegations because you don't like my opinions, I'm gonna take issue with that. That's the issue, that's the problem.
Okay, but like I said, I've literally been getting this critique since 2009, and I would argue that I got more progressive, not less. And I would argue that most of the world thinks I got more progressive, not less, right? But it is what it is. Okay, Jonathan Davis says, although we all have different opinions, it feels great to know we're all on the same side, helping those less fortunate, improving the lives of the everyday person, and supporting progressive movement. Feelings aren't facts, it's not personal. Keep up the great work. Jonathan, thank you for that comment and thank you for being so generous. Really appreciate it. Okay, I am out of time. Sorry guys, I'll be right back. All right, back on TYT, Cenk, Anna, Carl Dillianson, and Tony B, they just became members, we appreciate it. And then Joe Winterton, I think, gifted another 10 Young Turks memberships. And Athletes LLC, as I mentioned earlier, gifted 50. See, that's amazing, guys. They wrote in a couple of critical comments, but respectful and wonderful. It's great to have disagreement. There's nothing wrong with that. If you don't have any disagreement with the show, you have to wonder, wait a minute, are they thinking for themselves, right? And so anyways, but gifted all that membership anyway. That's what we love about them. That's what we love about our community. We stick together and try to get to the right answers together. All right, Casper.
The Koch-backed Americans for Prosperity Action Committee is basically trying to find ways to defeat Donald Trump in the Republican primary. So they've raised quite a bit of money, tens of millions of dollars so far in order to do just that. The political network established by the conservative industrialists, Charles and David Koch, has raised more than $70 million for political races as it looks to help Republicans move past Donald Trump. And that's according to an official with the group. So two groups closely affiliated with Charles Koch contributed 50 million of more than the 70 million that's been raised so far. Koch is a major shareholder in Koch Industries, which contributed $25 million to Americans for Prosperity Action. According to a preliminary draft of Federal Election Commission filings, another 25 million was donated by Stand Together, a nonprofit he founded. Now, other than Koch himself, according to the preliminary draft of the FEC filings for Americans for Prosperity, its major donors include Art Pope, a North Carolina businessman who attended a policy retreat hosted by Vice President Mike Pence, who's got no shot in this election, before he joined the presidential race. Craig Duchosis, I don't know how to say that guy's name, but anyway, a Chicago businessman. You also have Jim and Rob Walton, brothers and heirs to the Walmart fortune, and Ron Cameron, an Arkansas poultry magnate. Now, on one hand, it is interesting to see, these incredibly wealthy individuals go after Donald Trump, who did them a massive favor by cutting taxes on the rich. That was the one thing that Trump actually did accomplish during his first term, which was the 2017 tax cuts for the rich and corporations. But they see him as a destabilizing force within the country, so that's why they want to defeat him. I actually think this is going to end up helping Trump, especially if he campaigns on it.
Yeah, and he will. He's not a Democrat. He's already out there hitting them, and Steve Bannon's out there hitting them. I think that this could be an enormous silver lining in this story. Hold for that. So first, on the analysis of the core of the story. So we've been telling you all along that the donors are totally against Trump, the Republican donors, let alone the Democratic donors. And so why do you think that we've got all these Republican politicians all of a sudden willing to speak out against Trump like Chris Christie is? Because the donors are saying, here's a couple of, here's stacks of bills, go fight the son of a bitch. They always do what their donors tell them to do, period. Chris Christie isn't like a man of extreme courage. He's a man who spoke to donors and they promised him millions of dollars to go attack Donald Trump, okay? So that's just reality. I like what Chris Christie's saying, but that's definitely the motivation. If his donors told him, don't you dare attack Trump, he wouldn't say a word, okay? That is how corporate politicians work, and 90% of politicians are corporate. So and that phenomenon makes a difference, the money makes a difference, because it influences politicians and it influences media. And now all of a sudden Fox News hitting Trump over and over again, right? So you see the money flowing through the system. So don't discount it. Now, having said that, Trump has a giant megaphone. The number one thing that money buys you is media, right? But Trump already has so much media that when he screams back at him, he kind of takes their head off. So 70 million bucks ain't gonna do it, okay?
Right.
Against a guy who has one of the largest megaphones in American history.
Americans hate corruption across the board. Democrats, Republicans, conservatives, liberals, progressives, it doesn't matter. Voters understand that our politicians have been captured by corporate donors. So if Trump plays his cards right, and he did this in 2016 with Drain the Swamp and all of that, he could just point to this and be like, look at these billionaires trying to defeat me. Look at the corruption that they're engaging in. He can argue that he's not corrupt. Now, we all know that all this stuff is flat out lies, but it doesn't matter because that messaging resonates with voters. So he could take this, he could make a giant pitcher of lemonade out of these lemons.
So let me give you examples of how this can go and how it's gone in the past. So Anna's 100% right, and I think that's where the silver lining is gonna come in. So Trump has said this in the past and he's not shy about it. He says, goddamn corrupt donors, drain the swamp, right? And the right wing goes nuts. And here, again, in my book, Justice is Coming, I gave a lot of credit to right wingers for hating corruption, and I would argue hating corruption more than Democrats. So when you tell a Democrat Nancy Pelosi's taking $1 billion, they're like, that's awesome, she's an angel, it's no problem at all, right? For Republicans, when you tell them Mitch McConnell's taking $1 billion, they're like, no, he's corrupt, okay? So give him credit where credit is due. Now, if the right wing, but since no Democrat ever talks about the donors, because 90% of the party takes donor money, so they're just as guilty. And the other 10% are like, oh, my colleagues, I couldn't offend my colleagues. Well, that leaves the field to Trump being the only politician talking about corruption. By the way, that's not the silver lining, that's the disaster. That's the iceberg headed in this direction where Trump is going to be the only anti-corruption candidate. Now, guys, don't get me wrong, it's all fake. Trump took over $100 million from Sheldon Adelson twice. And he did everything that Adelson asked for. I devoted almost half a chapter to it in Justice is Coming. He gave and gave and gave. Trump is massively corrupt and he'll do anything the donors ask for. But people don't know that. Why don't people know that? Because the Democrats are like, oh, don't attack him on Adelson. We take donor money too. Oh, shush, don't say anything about the donors, right?
The media's not going to report on it.
Right. Nothing. Where do you think the money goes? All the money goes to media. It all goes to ads in mainstream media. So they're like, shh, don't talk about Adelson. Don't talk about the Kochs. Don't talk about ExxonMobil. Don't talk about Pfizer. They don't matter. Their billions of dollars don't matter. So since no one else is willing to talk about it because they're all corrupt, Trump goes in and goes, I'm corrupt, I'm more corrupt than they are, but who cares, idiots? I'll talk about corruption and how terrible corruption is and I'll win. Oh, you idiots, right? Okay, now finally, Jesus, where the hell is the silver lining? The silver lining is he is teaching right-wing voters that the donors are the essence of corruption. Now, if you ask Democratic voters, they'll tell you the same thing. Then they'll say, a lot of them, unfortunately, half of them will say, but not our guys are angels, right? The other half of Democratic voters are like, hell no, our guys are corrupt too. Of course the donor money affects them, right? But if we can get the side of the Democratic voters that agree that donor money is corruption, and then we get the right wingers thinking donor money is corruption, we got a national consensus. Okay, now that national consensus will be fought by the media the most, because they are the epicenter of corruption, and it'll be fought by 90% of the Democratic and Republican parties. But if we got all the voters or most of the voters on our side, that's a hell of a silver lining, okay? So Trump is, in that sense, doing the country a favor by pointing out that donor money is by definition corrupting when it's at this scale.
So speaking of that donor money, I mentioned the 70 million. Remember, we're very early in the election cycle. They are going to raise more money in an effort to defeat Trump. Let's take a look at how much they spent on the 2020 election cycle. The network spent nearly $500 million supporting Republican candidates and conservative policies in the 2020 election cycle alone. And you might be wondering, well, who are they trying to endorse? Who do they want to win in the Republican primary? Apparently, they haven't made up their minds yet. They're on the hunt for the preferred candidate here, but they know it's not Trump, and they've tried hard to make it clear that they don't even think that his nomination is inevitable. Honestly, when I look at the field right now, things could change, of course. I think it looks inevitable for the moment. I mean, again, things can change.
No, I think things can change.
Yeah.
And it's mainly the court cases against them and how devastating they are. But if there were no court cases, there's no way these chumps are gonna beat him. But those court cases are a hell of a curveball.
So Michael Palmer, who's the president of the Koch-affiliated voter data group I360, said this just this month: the notion of Trump's inevitability is being pushed by left-leaning media outlets, political operatives, and the Trump campaign itself. It's being pushed by, the Republican base and who they say they prefer in the polling.
Yeah, he has a 27-point lead in the polling. I hate Trump. I wish he would. If you gave me a button right now to push it where Trump could never run again, I pushed it already. Okay, he's the very first guy I would get out of politics.
Gone.
So silver lining or not, no. I loathe him. I think he would destroy democracy. I think he's a mortal danger to our Constitution, right? But he has a 27-point lead with Republicans, so take it up with them. We're not the issue. Your own voters are the issue, and so you find them meddlesome. You guys should fight and see how it turns out.
All right, time for an update on the seemingly imminent UPS strike.
This company is having record profits, and they're treating our members like shit.
97% of UPS union workers voted to authorize a strike this summer.
We're talking about nearly 350,000 workers.
As of yesterday, that strike seems pretty imminent. That's according to the Teamsters General President Sean O'Brien, who says leaders of the union have quit negotiating with UPS on a new contract, thanks to the bad faith nature of the employer in these negotiations. Let's go to the Teamsters tweet. Today, the International Brotherhood of Teamsters walked away from the national bargaining table and officially demanded UPS exchange its last, best, and final offer no later than June 30th. The Teamsters had initially given the company a week to propose a better offer. Now that is off the table, and here's why. Apparently, during the past week, UPS returned an appalling counterproposal to the union's financial package, offering minuscule raises and wage cuts to traditional cost of living adjustments. Now, the union explained in a statement that workers have basically had enough. And by the way, just a reminder, earlier this month, I had an interview with a representative with the union, and they talked about just what their concerns are, what they want changed in this new contract. They don't like the fact that there's different treatment for newer hires. It creates a rift between the employees at UPS, and there's more. And the union explained in a statement that executives at UPS, some of whom get tens of millions of dollars a year, do not care about the hundreds of thousands of American workers who make this company run. They don't care about our members' families. UPS doesn't want to pay up. Now, UPS is doing well profit-wise, and the concern here is the working conditions. The delivery drivers have to work in incredibly hot conditions with no air conditioning in their trucks, for instance. They want to reap the benefits of the profits that the executives are certainly enjoying here. Their actions and insults at the bargaining table have proven they are just another corporation that wants to keep all the money at the top. Working people who bust their asses every single day do not matter, not to UPS. And I've got more for you in just a moment, but Cenk, what are your thoughts?
Okay, here's my thought. This Sean O'Brien guy is my new favorite guy.
Totally.
Yeah.
He should run for president.
Maybe.
Seriously.
Okay, so look, the last 20 years at least, I'm used to heads of unions being like, oh yeah, we should mainly do whatever corporations want. And oh, is there a corporate Democrat that's gonna pretend to be on our side and then not give us anything? I'm gonna give all my money to him, okay? So here's a guy that's old school. He's like, oh, you wanna fight? Let's brawl, mother, right? I'm like, yes, finally. Where have you been hiding? This is what the head of the Teamsters should look like,
Absolutely.
Right? So, and this is the same guy, if you remember, that got in a fight with the Oklahoma senator.
Mark Wayne Mullen?
Yeah, Mark Wayne Grow Mullen. And they were gonna go do a cage match or something. And O'Brien's like, I'm your Huckleberry, okay? And I wouldn't be surprised if he brings 3 Teamsters in there with him and go, oh, are we being unfair? Okay. So, yeah, this is how you get power, by using your leverage. Guys, look, mainstream media and mainstream Democrats have tried to make you forget how politics actually works. You play, sometimes you do carrots, sometimes you do sticks, and sometimes you play hardball. And this is what hardball looks like. So you deliver for your own, okay? In this case, he's representing all these teamsters, all these workers who work their asses off and deserve better wages and benefits. That's how you do it.
Absolutely. And just to give you a sense of how well UPS is doing, they're not struggling. UPS spent $8.4 billion in stock buybacks this year, yet not a penny has went to provide better wages, benefits, or working conditions for their drivers. UPS has 40 days left to reach a deal with Teamsters before these workers strike. And I do want to also give you Senator Nina Turner's wonderful tweet here, because I agree with her completely, and this is exactly what I think should happen. Instead of a Teamster strike, what if, just hear me out, UPS decided to, meet their workers' demands?
Yeah, look, guys, I don't think stock buybacks are always the wrong thing. It might depend on the context, but $8.4 billion that you just gave back to your shareholders, saying the company doesn't need it. We don't need to invest in anything. We don't. We make so much profit that we can just reuse our profit, et cetera. I'm just going to give you all this money back. Okay, well, that's their right. But then you don't get to turn around and say, I got no money. I can't possibly pay my workers. I mean, golly gee, where would I get the money from? I don't know, how about the $8.4 billion you just give away, right? And so let alone the enormous profits you make every year, these companies pretending they don't have the money. It's one thing when it's a small company, a mid-sized company, a company that isn't public, so we're not sure about their finances. You're a public company. We know exactly what your finances are. So of course you have the money, you're just choosing not to share it. That's when workers use their leverage to make them share it. That's how it works.
Exactly. When we come back from the break, we'll talk about some pretty serious accusations leveled against Bill Gates. Don't miss it, we'll be right back.
Back during the social break here, the comments about earlier in the show and throughout the show continue to roll in. Let's go to Super Chat again. Happy Warrior says, thank you for having honest opinions and not being afraid to tell people how you feel about any issue. I appreciate it. The Breaker Wall says, Anna and Cenk, thanks for always being honest, but please debate Senator Nina Turner or Dr. Ritchie about this affirmative action ruling. Poor white kids are part of the majority. So here's what I'm not going to do, because I'm not crazy. I'm not debating Rashad Ritchie or Nina Turner, okay? So not gonna happen. There's 3 people I'd be reluctant to debate. They're 2 out of the 3. There's another one that's nearby. Okay, anyways, but look guys, these days in a normal world, I would. We'd talk about the issues, we'd debate, we'd discuss, we'd have a great conversation about it. But these days, whenever you debate anyone online, who got owned? No, I don't know. I don't want them owning us. I don't want me owning anybody. I hate the owning business, okay? So we try to have actual discussions on TYT. I know, call us crazy. Okay, Balk says, And by the way, does that mean I won't discuss it with Nina or Rashad? Of course I discuss it with them. I do that any second. Bach says, I like the disagreements the most. It's when I get to stop and interrogate my own beliefs.
Yes.
And I find it to be one of the best parts of life. Love you guys.
Yes, God, I agree so much with that. It makes life way more interesting.
You know who has looked into their own beliefs? Me. I used to be a Republican and now I definitely am not, okay? Right. And I used to be religious and now I definitely am not. I've looked into a lot of my beliefs and we should all do it. You should do like an inspection. Hey, where did this come from? Do I really agree with it, etc. All right, Shadiq Anderson, I believe, writes, in controversial opinions should be welcome, and I'm glad you guys allow it. Stay strong. These are all YouTube members now, okay? Tylandell73 says, this is why I like TYT, fair and honest. The whole TYT is awesome. You all have opinions, and I love especially when Cenk and Anna get fiery and have great debates. Thanks for the whole TYT team. By the way, Anna and I debate a lot, right? So then who's the one who's wrong? Who's the one who's the shill? Who's the one who's right wing? I don't know.
And those are my favorite shows. They're interesting, right? And it, again, the best part is it forces you to really consider what the flaws in your own arguments or your own thinking happen to be. So that's to say, when you guys write in and you disagree with us, that's totally fine. When you start throwing baseless accusations and claims against us, that's when we've got a problem.
Okay. Yeah, all right. Low Class News says, been powerful, honest conversation today, great show. Sean D. Huskin says, I agree with Cenk, it's more of a class issue, it's all about the money. Green. All right, back on TYT, Cenk and Anna with you guys. Felonious gifted 5 subs on Twitch and we appreciate it. And Decement wrote in, Anna's mildly my hero right now. I like that it's mild, but I also like that it's a hero.
I don't know what for, but thank you. Okay. I appreciate it.
All right, speaking of which, go ahead.
By the way, mild is the right amount. Mild is the right amount.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Yeah,
I really do.
Absolutely. Okay, let's move on. A new report by the Wall Street Journal exposes the bizarre and often sexual questions job applicants at Bill Gates's private office were allegedly asked by interviewers. Now, these allegations are specifically about Gates Ventures, which is Bill Gates's private office. And according to the report, some female job candidates were asked whether they ever had extramarital affairs, what kind of pornography they preferred, or if they had nude photographs of themselves on their phones. And that's according to the candidates and people familiar with the hiring process. So these are accusations, and the female candidates allegedly sometimes were asked whether they had ever danced for dollars. Some of the people said one of the candidates was asked whether she had ever contacted or contracted a sexually transmitted disease, according to the candidate. Now, it's not entirely clear whether, male applicants were asked such questions, but none who spoke to the Wall Street Journal said they had. Of course, a spokesperson for Bill Gates said that his office hasn't heard about such questions being asked during the background checks that are done by third-party contractors, and insisted that if those questions were being asked, it would totally be unacceptable. But here's another thing you should know about. Informally, Gates employees would warn job candidates that a former CIA agent would be drilling into medical information, past drug use and relationships, including former sexual partners, some people said. So the screenings, by the way, were conducted by a security consulting firm known as Concentric Advisors that has several former CIA and FBI officials on its staff.
Yeah, I can see questions that might get to the edge in an interview, and maybe once or twice, not too often, I've been asked an uncomfortable question in an interview, but nowhere near the line of getting up and leaving, right? Because you presumably go into the interview because you really want the job, you need the job, etc. And these jobs at Microsoft, I'm sure, are amazing jobs. Not all of them, but probably a lot of them. Having said that, there are 3 things at a minimum here where you got to get up and go. Somebody asks you in a job interview, hey, do you have any sexually transmitted diseases? I'm like, no, but okay, thanks, I appreciate it. I get up and leave.
Why would that be relevant?
That's my point.
These people are not running for public office.
No, it's not, guys. That's my point. It's not close. Someone asks you, hey, do you have nude pictures of yourself on your phone? You go, oh yeah, I'll be right back. It's pull a William Pope move. That's a friend of mine, got up in German class in 7th grade, excused himself to go to the bathroom, never came back. The whole year, never came back. Okay, pull a Pope, get out of there. Okay, somebody asks you what kind of porn you watch. The correct answer is get up, leave, period.
So apparently this security consulting firm likes to ask these types of questions to ensure that these people or potential hires don't have some shady things in their past that can be used against them as blackmail.
No, I understand the BS excuse.
That's a complete BS excuse. Like, come on.
It's not, look guys, not close, okay? So, and never tell anyone what kind of porn you watch. Oh no, I'm doing it for a background check, blah, blah, blah. No, nope, not telling. Or you say, oh yeah, what kind of porn do you watch? Well, oh no, that's not relevant to you. Well, neither is this, so go ahead and F off. Like, it's crazy talk, crazy talk.
Concentric said its protocols are totally kosher and follow.
Oh, okay, they said it, so it must be
true. They're following the laws, people. Asked how questions about sexual or medical histories comply with laws, a spokesperson for this company denied it initiated such questions and said such information can be volunteered by job candidates.
No, it can't. I've never seen it volunteered.
When asked about public records, job candidates disputed the characterization, saying they were asked about sensitive information and did not volunteer it.
Of course, guys, I've now done hundreds of interviews from the other side where I'm interviewing the person who's looking for a job. Never once has someone volunteered. Oh, by the way, these are my STDs. Never once has someone volunteered. Oh, by the way, I have naked pictures on my phone.
And by the way, I want to also be clear that I think you misspoke and just quickly mentioned these jobs at Microsoft are great. This isn't even for Microsoft jobs. These are for Bill Gates's private office.
Yeah, my
Gates
bad.
Ventures. Okay, so
yeah, but by the way, I bet those jobs are great jobs, meaning they pay a lot. And look, we're the fairest show in America. I think Bill Gates has done tremendous charity work. And I know that's not a popular opinion, and the right wing and the left wing, they both hate him now and they think maybe he destroyed the world or 5G or chips or something, right? Okay, and he's got questionable things in his past. All that notwithstanding, the guy has not only himself, but organized other billionaires to give away hundreds of billions of dollars. And you could even question how some of those charities work and whether they did a good job or whether some of them were counterproductive. But giving away hundreds of billions of dollars ain't a small thing. Having said that, these questions are nuts.
There's some stuff going on with Bill Gates that makes me a little uncomfortable.
Yeah,
I get it. And I've been waiting, I've been absorbing some of the news that's been coming out about him over the last few years because, people are very quick to make some pretty strong accusations about people, but I'm gonna give you all the details and then you can decide for yourselves because this stuff is starting to add up. So, Gates was investigated in 2019 by Microsoft board members over allegations of a past sexual relationship with a Microsoft employee. He had multiple extramarital affairs, which look, that's none of my business, right? Who cares about that? And I think he underwent a divorce. It seems like a pretty ugly divorce. So I think some of this stuff came out in that process, which is why I kind of hesitated on reporting on some of this stuff. But he had ties to notorious sexual abuser Jeffrey Epstein. So beginning in 2011, Gates met with Epstein on numerous occasions, including at least 3 times at Epstein's Manhattan townhouse. Epstein also spoke with Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and JP Morgan Chase about a proposed multi-billion-dollar charitable fund. Bill's wife, Melinda, apparently didn't feel comfortable with him spending time with Epstein, but he continued to do so anyway. And later, during their divorce, she alleged that that was a big reason why she no longer wanted to be with him. So the relationship soured. Epstein appeared to attempt to blackmail Gates in 2017 over an affair with a Russian bridge player Gates' spokespeople have said that he had a consensual relationship with the Microsoft employee about 2 decades ago, and that Epstein tried unsuccessfully to leverage the past relationship with the Russian woman.
Yeah, well, look, so first of all, any relationship with Epstein is toxic and disastrous. But in this case, and Epstein always, not always, but it seems like his MO was blackmail, right? That he would get people in compromising positions. And part of the reason why he had young girls is because they're enormously compromising. And part of it is because he's a sick dude and he liked that, right? And so now in the case of, we don't know who he has leverage over because all those powerful people went and then they didn't volunteer. Oh, by the way, he was blackmailing me, right? None of them volunteered that. There are some idiots like Trump who has verbal diarrhea and he said, oh, we know that Epstein likes him young, okay?
Yeah.
So, but in the case of Bill Gates, he specifically was apparently trying to blackmail him about extramarital affairs with grown women, right? So that doesn't make Gates a good guy, right? But understand that context as well. So mixed bag.
We've got one more story for you before we wrap up the main show and head over to our members only bonus. So let's do it. 2 Florida police officers allegedly put their 3-year-old child in handcuffs and in a jail cell to punish him after the child had trouble with potty training. And one of them even admitted to putting their other child in jail as punishment as well. So here are the details. Daytona Beach Shores Lieutenant Michael Schoenbrod told a Department of Children and Families caseworker that his son was having difficulty with toilet training and was jailed on successive days in October. No, this is insane. It's a three-year-old. The officer's son was reportedly handcuffed the second time he was jailed. On body camera footage from a sheriff's deputy, Michael can be heard saying of the incident, quote, he was crying, I was getting the response I expected from him. Now, Schoenbrod, who said his son vowed to never again poop his pants, co-parents the child with Deputy Sergeant Jessica Long of the Daytona Beach Shores Public Safety Department. Apparently, the cop has used this cruel tactic before. 9 years earlier, he said that he disciplined his 4-year-old son for hitting a girl at preschool. And let me give you the details on that. He said, quote, I took him to the jail and he sat there and I watched him and he was crying and everything. And to this day, if you mention like that incident, he's just like, I would never do that again. It was effective, so that's why I did it with this, meaning the potty training incident. He didn't hit anybody, but I figured the same thing, discipline, and he didn't want to go back, so. It's like,
no.
I mean, there are countless parents who potty train their children effectively without putting them in handcuffs and putting them in a jail cell.
Actually, almost all of them. Okay, so look, that is crazy traumatizing for a kid that age. He says, he was crying, I was getting the response I expected from him. Yeah, you put a 3.5-year-old in prison, you should expect that they're gonna cry their heads off. And they're gonna be intensely traumatized. Now, his excuse for all this, and I get it, everybody grew up differently. And so, I remember when Adrian Peterson, the star running back in the NFL, was disciplined for hitting his kids with a switch. And he would take skin off their back, okay, when he hit them.
Yeah.
And a lot of people were like, what do you mean? That's how we grew up. And so there's nothing wrong with that. That's culture, whatever, etc. Just because you grow up that way doesn't make it right.
Right.
And just because you think, hey, he was potty trained, so it must have worked. Well, every kid gets potty trained at some point, so that is not very convincing. But even with the kid that hit the other girl and then he never did it again, okay, here's another way you can get him to not do it again. That's also a terrible idea. Like, you know what? He hit the girl and I didn't like that, so I broke a couple of his fingers. And man, he cried like Dickens, but he never hit another girl again. Yeah, I'm not gonna call that mission accomplished. Maybe there are other pathways to that same result without being absurdly cruel.
So later on the hour-long body cam footage, so that's the mother, could be heard calling the investigation insane While Schoenbrod responded, "It's just disgusting that somebody would drag our family through the mud like this." Now, the investigation happened. Unfortunately, we don't know what the outcome of that investigation is because that has not been made public. According to the city clerk, the records can't be released because they've been sealed by a judge, but a court administrator denied that, saying the judge to whom the cases are assigned has not sealed them. An attorney with the county clerk of courts office wrote the cases are confidential due to motions for confidentiality filed within the cases. Look, the point is they're not making it public. So we don't know what the outcome of the investigation is, but you shouldn't be throwing your 3-year-old or your 4-year-old or any of your children in a jail cell because they're not complying with your parenting. Like, it's insane. You're traumatizing these kids.
Yeah, and look, I think the potty training is like not a big deal that I can't believe they did this with that. But in terms of like, even if the kid did something wrong, look, I did terrible things when I was a kid, right? And my dad was right to punish me, and a couple of times he didn't really want to do it, but because of the way he grew up, he did beatings or whatever, but not really, right?
He didn't beat you.
No, what is it called? Spanking or whatever,
beating
right?
is severe.
I know beating sounds severe, no.
Yeah.
And so he didn't have his heart into it, et cetera. But that doesn't mean that I have to spank my kids just because it happened to me, right? And sometimes that worked, sometimes it didn't work with me at all. It made me go in the opposite direction. So, and this is a thing that is super common, maybe not at this extreme, but just because your parents did X doesn't mean you have to do it. Analyze what the upsides and the downsides are, and nothing's worth traumatizing your kids like this for. All right, bonus episodes coming up. You guys are gonna love it. TYT.com/join. We'll see you there.
Hey everyone, Matteo Scarapore here, author of Black Buck, which is Shop TYT's first fiction book ever. I'm honored. So, Black Buck is about a young man named Darren who's living in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn. He lives with his mom, he has his girlfriend, he has his best friend, he has his neighborhood, and his neighborhood has him. Darren's also working at a Starbucks in Midtown Manhattan. And one day, this man, real suave and good looking, comes in and asks Darren to give him his regular. But for some reason, Darren says no. This man named Rhett Daniels, who's the CEO of a startup called Someone, located on the 36th floor of the same building, is impressed. And he invites Darren upstairs, and then he extends an offer to join his elite sales team. Darren reluctantly joins, and he soon realizes that he's not the only black salesperson there. He's the only black person in the entire company. So he goes through hell and back in order to make it to the top. And once there, he has status, money, power, but he says, you know what? I don't like being the token black guy. So he hatches a plan to help other people of color infiltrate America's tech startup sales teams, redefining what it means to be a minority in the workplace. This book definitely, if you couldn't tell, touches on many things that are relevant to this moment that we're all living in right now, but it's also connected to the many moments in history